Welcome the anointed ones. The moment you stop reacting, manipulators start malfunctioning. Let that sit with you, because in every room where a manipulator once reigned, your silence didn't just disturb the air, it shattered the illusion. They're not just irritated, they're not just mad. They are heated because you've become their worst nightmare, a person who sees through them and won't play the game. See, here's the wild part. According to psychological studies, manipulators rely on three key things: your confusion, your guilt, and your need for approval. Take those away, you've just unplugged their entire operating system. And you, chosen one, you're not just unplugged. You ripped the wires out and smiled while doing it. You didn't fall for the love bombing. You didn't get baited into guilt. And when they couldn't gaslight you into submission, they short-circuited. Now they're pacing, sulking, lying to themselves and anyone who'll listen, because the one person they couldn't manipulate was the one soul they underestimated the most. You. So buckle up, because in this video, we're exposing why they're so pressed, so petty, and so powerless in your presence. By the end, you won't just understand the game, they'll wish they never tried to play it with you in the first place. And hey, if they're watching this too, tell them to grab a fan, because the heat is real and you lit the fire. Number 1, you refuse to be confused, so they can't control the narrative. They can't stand you because you refuse to be confused. And confusion is the foundation of their control. That's what most people don't realize. Manipulators don't actually have power. What they have is distraction, distortion, and just enough smoke to make you question your own clarity. But you came with spiritual vision. You see things for what they are, not what they're pretending to be. And that alone destroys the entire game. They used to get away with it because most people are too emotionally entangled to spot what's really going on. Most are too afraid to look deeper, too scared to call it what it is. But you looked it straight in the face and said, "I see you." And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than being seen without their costume on. They wanted to lead you into drama, arguments, guilt, and games. But you stayed still. You asked questions, you noticed contradictions, you trusted your gut over their tone. And every time you did that, you ruined another one of their plays. Because their power isn't in force, it's in misdirection. The more distracted you are, the easier you are to move. But you didn't follow the noise. You stayed focused on the truth. That's why they're heated. You didn't get lost in their storm. You watched the clouds form and said, "I'll bring an umbrella." You didn't get pulled into the role they cast for you. You rewrote the script in real time. And once you see a manipulator clearly, they lose access to your mind, your emotions, and your peace. That's what makes you dangerous. You no longer need them to make sense of the situation. You've stopped outsourcing your clarity. Now you move on facts, not feelings. You ask real questions. You catch subtle contradictions. You notice when someone's words and energy don't match. That level of awareness makes you immune, and that immunity makes them furious. They can't operate in clarity. They depend on fog. But you turned on the light, and once the light's on, the roaches scatter. That's what this is. You've become the light they can't manipulate and the mirror they can't dodge. And now their tactics don't just fail, they expose them. Number 2. Your emotional discipline blocks their entry points. Manipulators hate emotionally disciplined people because it strips them of their favorite weapon, emotional chaos. They need you to overreact. They need you to panic, to snap, to cry, to defend yourself uncontrollably. That's where they do their best work, when you're too emotionally shaken to think straight. But when you stay grounded, when you feel everything without acting on impulse, you leave them stuck with no entrance point, and that drives them absolutely mad. They count on triggering you. They drop little insults masked as jokes. They twist your words, play the victim, give you the silent treatment, or suddenly explode, all just to provoke a reaction. But when you don't respond the way they expect, it throws them off completely. You're not shutting down, you're simply not handing over your emotional keys. They poke and prod, waiting for you to break down. But you keep showing them that your peace is not up for negotiation. What they don't understand is that emotional discipline doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've matured to a level where you no longer let people control you through your feelings. You can feel anger without acting reckless. You can feel sadness without begging for connection. You can feel confused and still choose patience. That inner stability makes you a wall they can't climb, and that wall blocks their access to control. They can't stand that you don't feed their fire, because every manipulator needs energy to work with. If they can't use yours, they run out. That's why they used to thrive in your reactions, your panic, your tears, your arguments. But now, they're looking at a version of you they can't move, a version that observes, processes, and stays centered. And that version is a problem they don't know how to solve. They'll accuse you of being cold, they'll say you're detached or unbothered. But what's really happening is you've stopped being emotionally hijacked. You've taken your power back by choosing your responses carefully. And when you're no longer reactive, you become a mirror that shows them who they are without the distraction of your drama. That's the real reason they're so triggered, because your discipline forces them to face their own lack of control. Number 3, you don't seek belonging where you're being controlled. Manipulators lose their grip on you the moment you stop needing to belong in places that require your silence, your shrinking, or your self-betrayal. That's the part they never expected. They thought your desire to be accepted would override your ability to see the truth. But you walked away anyway. You didn't need the group, the title, the approval, or the fake peace. You chose your soul over their system. And that's when their frustration turned into obsession. Most people stay stuck because they want to belong so badly. They'll tolerate mistreatment, play along with lies, and even gaslight themselves just to stay in the room. But not you. You woke up to the fact that any place where your power has to be dimmed isn't a safe space. It's a trap. And the moment you stopped begging for seats at tables built on control, the game shifted. They can't manipulate someone who has nothing to prove. That's your power. You don't need their validation to feel real. You don't need the applause to know you're valuable. And when they realized you wouldn't trade your truth for inclusion, they panicked. Because inclusion is how they kept others in check. They offer acceptance like a prize, and most fall for it. But you were willing to walk away, even if it meant being misunderstood, talked about, or isolated. You know something most don't. Being excluded by manipulators is a spiritual promotion. It means you're no longer under their spell. It means their approval no longer intoxicates you, and that independence makes you deeply threatening. They can't pull your strings if you don't care about their stage. They can't buy your silence if you're not impressed by their spotlight. They wanted you to feel like the outcast, but deep down, they know you're the one who got free. You didn't lose access to a community. You escaped a cage. And now that you're not sitting at their table, you can finally see how much poison was on the menu. That kind of clarity can't be undone, and that's what really eats them up. You're not desperate to be chosen by the crowd anymore, because you've already been chosen by something far greater. And once you've tasted real alignment, manipulation just tastes cheap. Number 4, they can't exploit you because you see the pattern before the play. They can't stand you because you don't wait until the damage is done to call out the game. You catch it at the source. You've lived through enough cycles to know how the script goes. You've seen the bait, the build-up, the blow-up, and the blame shift. And now, You don't need to wait for the fire to burn everything down before realizing someone was holding a match. You already smelled the smoke, checked the lighter in their pocket, and walked out before the show even started. That makes you unpredictable. And to manipulators, unpredictability is terrifying. They can't exploit you because you don't operate from naivety anymore. You've been the one who gave chances, you've excused red flags, you've over-explained, you've waited too long to leave. But not now. Now, you don't just respond to their behavior, you decode it. You don't react to the words, they're too easy to fake. You watch the pattern, you feel the shifts, you catch the script change before the performance begins. They don't even get to finish the first act before you've already closed the curtain. That's what eats them up. You were supposed to fall for it like everyone else. You were supposed to play your part, maybe the forgiving one, maybe the overgiver, maybe the scapegoat. But you stopped playing roles in other people's manipulative productions. You don't need to see how it plays out because you already know how it ends, and it's always with you picking up the pieces while they play victim. Not this time. You've trained your intuition like a bloodhound. One energy shift, one odd phrase, one little inconsistency, and you're already 3 steps ahead. They think they're being clever, but you've already mapped out the exit route, not because you're paranoid, but because you're prepared. You've seen enough games to recognize the field, and now you walk in with full awareness and 0 tolerance. They hate that they can't surprise you anymore. Because manipulation is all about catching you off guard, but you don't live in denial now. You live in discernment. And when a manipulator meets someone who can predict their next move before they even make it, the game doesn't just fall apart. It exposes who they've been the whole time. Number 5. Your integrity isn't negotiable, and that kills their leverage. Manipulators can't stand people who have non-negotiable integrity, because it renders all their usual tactics useless. They're used to buying people with praise, access, favors, opportunities, or fear. They think everyone wants something badly enough to bend. But you shattered that assumption. You're not playing the game for attention, clout, money, or even revenge. You're anchored in something they can't fake: principles. And when they realize your values aren't for sale, their entire strategy implodes. They want leverage, some hook to pull on when you get out of line. That's why they dangle things: inclusion, protection, false loyalty, shared secrets. But none of that moves you. You've already decided who you are and what you stand for, and no amount of pressure or promise can talk you out of it. That's a terrifying kind of freedom to someone who relies on control. They can't guilt you, they can't flatter you, they can't tempt you. You're simply not up for negotiation. What they don't understand is that your integrity wasn't born in ease, it was built through fire. You've been through enough to know that compromising yourself never brings peace. You've done it before. You've played along. You've kept quiet. You've said yes when everything in your spirit screamed no. And the pain that followed taught you something priceless. Your integrity is your protection. Once you learned that, you stopped folding. And now, you'd rather lose the deal than lose your soul. That's what really enrages them. Because manipulators only know how to operate in gray areas where lines can be blurred and people can be persuaded. But you walk in with clear boundaries, clear no's, clear conscience. And that clarity blocks every manipulative route they know how to use. They call you difficult. They call you stubborn. They say you're too rigid or too proud. But what they're really saying is, I can't move you like I've moved others. That's why they lash out, because they can't control what they can't compromise. At the end of the day, they're not angry that you said no. They're angry that you meant it. And that unshakable commitment to your truth, that's power they'll never be able to imitate, let alone defeat. Number 6, you know the power of saying no without explaining yourself. Manipulators hate it when you say no and don't offer them a door back in. You used to over-explain, didn't you? You'd try to be polite. You'd soften the blow. You'd give reasons, justifications, disclaimers, all in the hope that they'd understand, or at least respect your choice. But what you didn't realize then was that every word you gave them was fuel for their manipulation. The more you explained, the more they twisted. The more you justified, the more they prodded. You were handing them the blueprint to emotionally guilt-trip you, and they knew exactly how to use it. But you've changed. Now your no stands on its own. No speech, no panic, no sugarcoating. Just a boundary, clean and clear, and that's exactly why they're furious. Because manipulators don't know what to do with a boundary they can't argue with. They want an opening, a crack, a sentence to spin, a weakness to press into. But when you say no with calm conviction, there's nothing for them to push against. You've given them no handle to grab, no string to pull. It's not about being cold, it's about being clear. You've learned that your peace is more important than being liked, that your emotional energy is too precious to waste on explaining things to people who never planned to understand you in the first place. You've realized that people who truly respect you don't need 10 reasons to accept your boundary, and people who don't respect you will never find your reasons good enough anyway. That's what kills their control. They can't get under your skin anymore because you stopped inviting them there. You stopped negotiating your no. You stopped performing for approval. Your detachment is not distance, it's protection. It's you reclaiming the emotional space they used to treat like a playground. So now when they try to guilt you, shame you, or provoke you into explaining yourself, they're met with stillness. No argument. No need to defend. And in that stillness, they finally feel what they used to avoid. Powerlessness. Not because you screamed, not because you slammed the door, but because your silence wasn't weakness. It was final, and that finality, it ends the game before it even begins. Number 7. They're used to leading blind followers you see with inner vision. They're used to people following based on image, status, or carefully staged performances. They know how to cry on cue, wear the right mask, speak the right spiritual lingo, or play the wounded hero to get sympathy and control. And it usually works. Because most people only look at the surface. But you don't. You've developed a kind of sight that scares them. You don't look with just your eyes. You read the frequency. You don't just hear what they say, you feel what they're not saying. That kind of perception can't be fooled, and it makes you unmanageable in the hands of a manipulator. They thrive in crowds where people are too asleep to question, too nice to challenge, or too broken to resist. They build their power on people who crave approval and are easily swayed by surface-level charm. That's their audience. But you were never their audience. You're the one who walks in and instantly sees what others are still clapping for. You don't need someone to break character for you to know they're acting. You already felt the inconsistency the moment they opened their mouth. You didn't need evidence. They were exposed the second their energy showed up in the room. That's why they avoid you or obsess over you. You break their illusion just by being present. Because your discernment isn't based on how someone looks, what they say, or what role they pretend to play. You move by alignment, not appearance. You recognize patterns. You spot energy shifts. And most importantly, you're not afraid to call it out or walk away from it. You don't chase people just because they're loud, well-liked, or emotionally messy. You don't follow people just because they claim to be a leader. If the energy doesn't feel clean, if the motives don't align, if the words and actions don't match, you're out. No matter who they are, no matter what they've built. That kind of clarity terrifies manipulators because it means you can't be recruited, flattered, or emotionally blackmailed into loyalty. They're used to controlling blind followers, but you've got inner vision. You're wide awake, And in a room full of people under a spell, the one who sees clearly becomes a threat. That's why they fear you. You're not under the illusion. They are. Number 8. You can't be flattered into submission. Manipulators don't always start with insults or aggression. Some of them come dressed in praise. They lead with charm, compliments, exaggerated admiration, all sugar, no substance. It's not real love or respect. It's bait. They've learned that many people will do anything for a little validation, so they pile on the sweet talk, hoping you'll drop your guard and open the door. But with you, the door stayed shut. Because you weren't starved for attention, you weren't waiting to be seen. You already knew who you were, and that made you immune to their flattery. They thought they could win you over by making you feel special. They thought some praise would make you pliable, that a few nice words would make you loyal, obedient, maybe even dependent. But you didn't melt, you didn't bite, you saw through it. Because real confidence doesn't feed on applause. It flows from alignment. And you weren't fooled by a shallow compliment when you could sense the hidden agenda underneath it. What they didn't realize is that you're not new to this. You've seen people pretend to admire you, only to flip when they couldn't control you. You've seen how fake support turns into subtle sabotage the moment you say no. So now, you don't take praise at face value. You listen to the tone, the timing, the intention. You ask yourself, does this feel real or does it feel strategic? They can't stand that you stayed grounded, that their compliments didn't hypnotize you, that their fake admiration didn't earn them access, because you didn't hear their praise and think, wow, I must be amazing. You thought, what do they want? Not because you're cynical, but because you've learned. Flattery is a tool, and in the hands of a manipulator, it's the quietest weapon. But it only works when the target needs approval to feel powerful. And you don't. You weren't flattered. You were focused. You weren't desperate to be liked. You were committed to being respected. And that's what they couldn't control. Because once you stop needing to be impressed, you become impossible to impress. And without your admiration, their influence has no power. Number 9. They hate you for exposing how fake their influence really is. They hate you because you didn't play along. You didn't buy into the act. You saw right through the image they spent so much time crafting. The persona built on control, charm, intimidation, or false humility. And when you didn't fall for it, their entire illusion began to collapse. Because manipulators don't actually have real influence, they survive off perception. They rely on image more than substance. And you were the one bold enough to stop clapping when the performance started looking fake. Your resistance exposed them, not by making a scene, not by calling them out in public, but by simply refusing to submit. And that shook people. Because when someone others seem to respect suddenly loses your respect, people notice. They start to ask questions. Why don't you follow them? Why do you keep your distance? Why do you seem immune to their power? That quiet defiance disrupts their illusion. It makes people wonder what's really behind the curtain. That's what makes them furious. You didn't have to destroy their reputation. Your presence alone cracked it. Because the truth is, their influence was never based on leadership or authenticity. It was based on control, fear, manipulation, and appearances. And when you didn't fold, it showed everyone that the emperor has no clothes, that their authority doesn't work on people who aren't mentally controlled or emotionally baited. They're angry because you broke the spell. You didn't just walk away. You showed others it was possible to walk away too. And nothing is more dangerous to a manipulator than someone who shows people they don't have to bow. You didn't just protect yourself. You disrupted their entire ecosystem of control. Now they have to work twice as hard to keep others in line because your freedom is contagious. Your clarity is a silent rebellion. You didn't need to expose them with words. Your refusal to participate was the exposure, and that's what they'll never forgive you for. Because when someone builds their identity on illusion, the one person who sees the truth becomes the greatest threat of all. You became the mirror, and mirrors don't lie, they just reflect. And what they saw in you, and what others started seeing because of you, was the truth they hoped would never come out. Number 10. You can't be guilt-tripped into self-betrayal anymore. They hate that their favorite weapon, guilt, no longer works on you. That used to be their go-to move. Make you feel bad for having boundaries. Twist your empathy into obligation. Blur the lines between love and servitude. They knew you had a good heart, and they used it against you. They convinced you that being nice meant saying yes to everything, sacrificing your needs, and never putting yourself first. But those days are over. Because now, you know the difference between kindness and self-abandonment. You've outgrown their spiritual blackmail, the way they used your conscience to control you. They dressed their manipulation in moral language. They called your resistance pride. Your boundaries were labeled unforgiveness. If you stood your ground, they said you weren't being Christ-like, or gracious, or humble. But deep down, you always felt something was off. Because real love doesn't require you to betray yourself. Real relationships don't demand your silence or submission in the name of peace. The truth is, they never respected your yes. They just expected it. And the one time you said no, they made it a whole drama. Because for them, your yes was never about connection. It was about control. You saying yes kept them in power. You saying no forced them to face their own emptiness. Now you've stopped explaining your boundaries like they're up for debate. You've stopped apologizing for needing rest, space, clarity, or time. And that self-respect they couldn't manipulate, it drives them mad. Because it means they can't get to you through guilt anymore. They can't twist your compassion into compliance. They can't make you feel like the villain just because you chose yourself. Your peace is no longer up for discussion. You've realized that protecting your mind, your spirit, and your energy is not selfish. It's sacred. And now that you've dropped the guilt, their entire hold on you has collapsed. Because their manipulation was never built on truth. It was built on your willingness to carry emotional weight that was never yours to hold. That's why they're spiraling. Because once someone can't guilt you, they can't guide you. And once you stop betraying yourself to make others comfortable, the whole system built on your silence starts to fall apart. Number 11. They fear you because you won't abandon yourself to keep the peace. Manipulators bank on one thing: your discomfort with conflict. They thrive in environments where people will do anything to keep the peace, even if it means completely betraying themselves in the process. And for a while, you probably did just that. You kept quiet when you wanted to speak. You agreed when everything in your spirit screamed, no. You swallowed your truth just to avoid the blow-up. But not anymore. You've crossed a line within yourself, and now your inner peace means more than anyone's approval. You've realized something most people are too afraid to face. Abandoning yourself to avoid a fight is the real war. And you got tired of waking up every day feeling like a stranger in your own life. You got tired of playing nice when it meant living small. And once you made the decision to stay loyal to your truth, no matter who didn't like it, everything changed. That shift makes you dangerous to manipulators, because their entire strategy is built on your fear of being misunderstood, disliked, or called difficult. They want you to tiptoe, apologize, second guess. But when you finally said, let them be uncomfortable, I'm not lying to myself anymore, they lost their grip. You removed the fear they were feeding on. Now, you'd rather face temporary tension than carry the long-term weight of pretending. You'd rather lose fake peace than gain real freedom. And that kind of clarity doesn't just protect you, it exposes them, because they don't know how to handle someone who's no longer emotionally negotiable. You're not triggered by their silence. You're not chasing their approval. You're not backing down because the room got quiet. You're standing your ground, even if you have to stand alone. And they hate that. They hate that your peace no longer depends on their reaction, because it means they can't bend you, guilt you, or gaslight you into submission. You've chosen alignment over agreement, truth over tolerance. You won't betray yourself just to be seen as agreeable, and that to them is rebellion, but to you, that's healing, that's power. That's finally being free. Because if keeping the peace requires you to disappear, then it's not peace, it's control. And you're done playing that role. Number 12. They can't control a person whose identity isn't on lease. Manipulators can't stand that you know who you are, because their control depends on you not knowing. They rely on people whose identities are still being shaped by approval, attention, fear, or fitting in. People who are still waiting to be told they're enough. But you're different. You've already done the inner work. You've peeled back the layers, looked at your wounds, faced your insecurities, and reclaimed your truth. So now, your identity isn't up for negotiation. It's not on lease. It's fully owned, and that ownership makes you impossible to steer. Most people, without realizing it, give parts of themselves away just to be accepted. They water themselves down. They stay silent to avoid conflict. They play roles that feel safer than being real. But every time you give someone control over how you see yourself, you've given them a piece of your power. And that's exactly what manipulators look for. They want access to your self-image. Because once they can shape how you see yourself, they can shape how you act. But you broke that cycle. You stopped chasing approval and started listening to your soul. You stopped morphing to fit rooms that weren't built for your truth. And now, when a manipulator comes around with flattery, criticism, guilt, or pressure, it all falls flat because you're not looking to them for validation. They can't dangle inclusion, status, or attention in front of you like a carrot. You're no longer hungry for what they offer because you've already fed yourself what truly matters: self-acceptance. That's what makes you a problem in their world. You won't bend to be liked. You won't shrink to stay invited. You won't perform to earn belonging. And because you don't need the roles they expect you to play, they can't cast you in their manipulative script. You don't match the mold, and your refusal to mold breaks the illusion they've built with others. They tried to label you, influence you, reframe your value, but you were already rooted, already grounded, already whole. They don't know what to do with someone they can't shame, flatter, or pressure into submission. And that's why they fear you. Because your identity is locked in, and they never held the key. Number 13. You don't confuse loyalty with slavery. Manipulators always try to weaponize loyalty. To them, it's not about trust or connection. It's about control. They expect you to stay silent when they're wrong, support them when they're abusive, and excuse their actions in the name of being loyal. And if you dare to walk away or speak up, they'll accuse you of betrayal. But you've grown past that trap. You've redefined loyalty in a way they can't twist, because now your loyalty starts with your soul, not with them. They hate that. They hate that you can love someone and still choose yourself, that you can care deeply and still walk away from dysfunction, because they assumed your loyalty meant submission. They thought that once they had your trust, they owned your voice. But what they didn't realize is that real loyalty isn't slavery. It's not about ignoring red flags or tolerating pain for the sake of history, bloodline, or shared memories. Real loyalty honors truth even when it's uncomfortable, and your truth said, enough. You realize that staying in something toxic doesn't prove loyalty, it proves fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being called disloyal, fear of being misunderstood. But the day you stopped letting fear lead your decisions, you became untouchable. You no longer feel guilty for protecting your energy. You no longer confuse endurance with virtue. You know that loyalty to others should never require betrayal of yourself. That's what really breaks them, because they counted on your silence. They thought your loyalty would keep you blind, quiet, obedient. But instead, it gave you the strength to leave. You didn't leave because you stopped loving them. You left because you started loving yourself more. And to a manipulator, that shift is the ultimate betrayal. Because once you show that you'll walk away for the sake of your peace, they know they'll never fully own you again. They try to spin it. They'll call you fake, disloyal, or selfish. But deep down, they know the truth. You simply refused to be loyal to a version of them that was killing you. And that kind of clarity, that kind of courage, it breaks every hold they thought they had. Because the moment you chose your soul over their expectations, their grip shattered. Number 14. They realize the only way to control you is to become honest. And that's the one thing they can't do. They hate how the rules have changed. You're not reacting like you used to. You're not chasing, bending, or negotiating anymore. You've created a line in the sand that isn't drawn with words, it's made of energy. And the line is clear. If you want access to me, you have to be real, not fake deep, not selectively honest, not temporarily humble, real. And that's the one thing most manipulators can't be, because their entire identity is built on avoidance, image, and control. You're not playing tug-of-war with their ego anymore. You're not waiting for them to evolve, explain, or behave. You're not trying to decode the mixed signals or dance around their triggers. You've stepped into a place of self-respect that issues an unspoken challenge. Only authenticity can reach me now, and that alone sends them into panic. Because the version of themselves they'd need to become in order to reach you, that version doesn't exist yet, and creating it would require real growth, something they've spent their whole life avoiding. They realize that manipulation used to work because you were willing to meet them halfway in dysfunction. You used to justify their behavior, give them the benefit of the doubt, and water down your intuition just to keep the peace. But now, you've shut that door. You've made healing the price of entry. And suddenly, they don't know what to do with you. They can't lie small and get away with it. They can't twist stories and still be heard. They can't half apologize and expect full forgiveness. Every false version of themselves gets met with a blank stare and no access. You've created a space where the only currency is truth, and they're spiritually bankrupt. That's why they're heated. Because to be around you now, they'd have to confront everything they've been running from. The masks, the manipulation, the ego-driven lies. It would all have to go. And for many manipulators, losing the mask feels scarier than losing the relationship. So they walk. Not because you're too much, but because honesty is too expensive. You didn't ask them to be perfect. You just asked them to be honest. And when they realized that was the only way to stay in your presence, they finally understood. You weren't the one being difficult. You were just the one who finally made integrity non-negotiable. They thought you'd be easy to mold, easy to confuse, flatter, guilt, or silence. But you've shattered every tool they once used against you. You've outgrown their tactics, outsmarted their illusions, and disconnected your worth from their approval. And now, they're left spinning, trying to play a game that no longer works on someone who sees it before the first move is even made. You didn't just survive manipulation, you studied it, decoded it, and evolved beyond it. You've become a mirror they can't distort, a presence they can't predict, and a soul they can't buy. And that infuriates them, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. You're no longer available to people who require your confusion to function. You no longer shrink to keep the peace. You no longer abandon yourself to belong. You are what every manipulator fears. the one who cannot be moved without truth. That's why they're heated. That's why they whisper, twist stories, play victim, and retreat into silence. Not because you wronged them, but because you outgrew their ability to control you. You didn't just close the door, you evolved into someone they have no keys for. Let that be your reminder. Every time someone can no longer manipulate you, they'll say you've changed. And they're right. You've changed into someone who chooses alignment over approval, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over fake loyalty. That's not rebellion, that's healing. And if they're still heated by that, let them burn, because you've got bigger things to build than bridges back to dysfunction. If this message resonated with you, if you've ever had to reclaim your power from manipulation and walk away from people who couldn't handle your truth, then you're in the right space. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss these powerful uploads. Hit the like button if this message hit home. Comment below and let me know which part spoke to your soul. I love hearing your thoughts and your breakthroughs. And if you know someone who needs this clarity in their life, share this video with them. Let's keep growing, healing, and evolving together. You're not alone, and your truth is your superpower. I'll see you in the next one. Stay grounded, stay real, and most importantly, stay unshakably you. God bless you.